Hey guys, I just want to let you know that I am now a certified spiritual life coach. If you resonate with the topics and lessons that my guests and I discuss on my podcast, and you feel that you could use some empowerment and direction in your journey of becoming who you truly are, consider booking a free discovery call with me on my website at kindlemccullough.com. And now on to the episode. Hey guys, I'm excited today. I have with me my friend Daniel Bilog, and I met him on Threads, and I just really liked his stuff. We kind of talked back and forth some, and got to know each other a little bit, and then we decided to have a video chat. Got to know each other even more. Really enjoyed our conversation, and so I thought I'd have him on the podcast. He's a great guy and has a lot to offer. So thank you for coming on, Daniel.
Pleasure to be here, and pleasure to be in the presence of your listeners as well. So excited about what we're gonna talk about, and ready for it, brother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. So you want to give a little intro to who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So, my thank you for the brief introduction and how we met. But my name is Daniel Bilog. Currently, I am in San Jose, California, in Ohlone territory, and I've lived here all my life, um, and the kind of work that I do currently today is I am a men's coach and a men's work facilitator, for men of color specifically, but have been opening up to other types of circles as well. And a lot of my focus as a men's coach is to integrate the modalities of hypnotherapy, but also coming from a decolonial lens. And because me being Filipino, I come from a very specific background and history where I come from a deep history of generational trauma and how that lives in me. And so a lot of my work is focused on decolonial, anti-patriarchal kind of lens in my men's work, and we also explore in my work. Emotional versatility, emotional intelligence, emotional embodiment, the somatics of emotions and how that is expressed in our bodies. And so we explore that together in the groups as well as in the one-on-ones, so we can do our best to kind of untangle from our environmental and cultural conditioning that we come from. And so we as men can show up a little bit more authentic, a little bit more present, rather than showing up in a way where we're performing or we have to posture because of this patriarchal kind of system that we live in. And so we can be a little bit more real, um, and uh, and I'm also someone who also incorporates into my work, because of the decolonial lens, ancestral kind of ritualistic kind of veneration. And so I consider myself kind of a modern mystic, but also deep in
Mm,
ceremony, deep in ceremonial practice, deep in ritualistic practices that are grounded from my own experience and the spaces that I've been around, and the people that I've been around, the shamans, the indigenous folks that I'm in relationship with. And so and the elders that I have been in connection with. So I've been a student and I've been a listener for about 7 to 8 years now, and I've learned a lot about um, how to connect with the grief, how to connect with our ancestors, and what that whole practice is about. So I'm ready to offload that to your community here.
yeah. Wow. What an intro.
Yeah,
That's great. A lot of great things, and I'm sure a lot of that will be a part of our conversation today. As
absolutely.
we talk about our experience as men, specifically growing up in America, and loneliness and how, yeah, that affected our
Yeah.
lives. So yeah, do you want to kind of get into your journey growing up and what your experience was with loneliness and being a man?
That is such an open-ended question.
Right.
Like, I think we've talked about this, and I was like, where the hell do we start? You know, there's so many angles we can talk about it.
Hmm.
But because I also want to be mindful of your listeners, you know, who may have come from Christian backgrounds as well, and
Hmm.
so something that might be relatable as me growing up is I grew up in a Catholic Orthodox environment, you know, and so that that had a lot of I had a lot of questions growing up about these beliefs and um, how I chose how I chose to follow what I didn't quite fully understand, and I would say I guess that's the beginning of feeling loneliness, you know, like we're here given what's called a religion and saying this is what we believe in, and as children, um, you know, our parents are the whole world, and so we're gonna
Mm.
go, hey, I think I know what they're talking about, but deep down inside, you know, we didn't have the language for the unconscious mind, but we were like, but this doesn't feel right, you know,
Mm. Hmm.
in its own way. And so here begins the journey of already like being disconnected about um our experience about the world and reality. But again, we come full circle with it. But having that, you know, having experienced that religion growing up, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten all the way to eighth grade, and I would say I was performing the whole way through. I never really connected with it, and so I would say I did feel already alone because I this is not something I was able to share with my classmates or my parents about like I have questions here,
Mm. Hmm.
right? Because if as growing up as children to speak up about it even in Bible study, like, you know, you ask some really objective questions that can really challenge the Bible in certain ways, and you will get shot down, you know.
Hmm.
And growing up as a kid, you already begin to doubt yourself, and there's another impression about how to be lonely. um but yeah, that's the religion aspect, and also growing up, I guess we'll jump into to going into high school. It was my first opportunity to um how do I say this? My first opportunity to not go to Catholic school anymore, right? And
Mm.
so I was in a public school environment, and I felt kind of rebellious, you know? I'm like, wow, I feel a little freer. What shit can I get into? And so you know, I made some friends, you know, with some really with really cool folks, and then you could get into the dynamics of just being in high school, and the posturing already as teenagers for boys, right? And like,
Mm.
hey, look at these girls, and you know, and then you hear stories from like the juniors and the seniors, like people sleeping with each other, and like
Mm.
there's this whole world about sexuality already, you
Hmm.
know. And then you think about like how do how do I get into this exciting
Hmm.
kind of world, right?
Hmm.
Being bottled up and alone in a whole, the whole experience being in a bubble like Catholicism, growing up, and having this opportunity of possibilities and excitement and exhilaration about sex and drugs and experimentation, and just doing the, you know, what kids aren't supposed to do, like going out late night, maybe even drinking alcohol at 16 years old, you know, just all those things. Um and I started to not feel alone because I was starting to have conversations outside of religion and have conversations about sex, about drugs, about let's go out, and how can we cut class and all that. And it was very, I had a sense of freedom for the first time, right? And
Mm.
and even the and my my parents had this perception because I went to Catholic school that I was a quote unquote good kid, but what is the outcome of not being able to share who you are? And at some point you're like, oh my God, I gotta hide this part of myself because it's seen as disrespect to what the intention of why they wanted me to go to Catholic school, right? To kind of learn about the word of Jesus and how do we model that, right, as human beings. Um, and so yeah, going to high school with that as well, being very excited about that that life with a bunch of boys, experiencing that, and I got introduced to a lot of like street life for the first time, and meeting all kinds of people. And so I would say I didn't feel alone, you know, um, for a majority of that time, and that went through all the way through college and until I even after I graduated college. And so that was a life of belonging for me. And that was a type of belonging that was offered by the culture of, for lack of better term, the upbringing of patriarchal culture, because um, these were about being with other boys, want talking about how can I sleep with this woman, and then just this internal um unconscious kind of like fun competitiveness about like what is your body count, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't even say these terms these days, but back then it was like a game, right?
Mm,
And it made me feel alive, it made me feel powerful, but and we respected each other because of our quote unquote trophies,
mm,
and then the drug life that I was exposed to. I got into raves in high school and in college, and the experimentation with cannabis and ecstasy and alcohol. Um, for me, as someone who has been feeling alone, um, having having taken those substances made me feel like a new person. It made me access parts of myself that maybe it's even when I was on these substances, maybe it was showing parts of who I really was, right? Without the conditioning, because
mm,
and it gave little snippets of like, wow, I feel so great because I don't have to edit myself. I don't have to go by the script about but even then I didn't have the language about like what this all meant, moving through this patriarchal culture of belonging, with other boys. And we'll name these as boys
mm-hmm.
because we haven't reached a kind of maturity where
Mm,
we respect our people, it's kind of like, how do we dominate each other? How do we control each other? How do we suppress our emotions in the in favor of a number, in favor of
mm,
how we will be perceived,
mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
boys. Um, and it was all very great. I had many great experiences. Um, we created great bonds in these friendship with these men in my life, with these boys in my life. Um, it made me um, it it gave me the opportunity to build relationships with others in this way, and I loved having these friendships. We would, and what I was also noticing is, as a boy at that time, I did notice that a lot of my a lot of my friendships, my deeper friendships were with women, were with girls. And I never quite understood why that
Mm,
was. And
mm,
when I look back at it, I was learning that I was someone who was in tap, who was uh, who was naturally attuned to their emotional body, their
mm,
feelings, you know.
mm,
And I think I was able to relate to the feminine energy with other girls in a very natural way, you know. And I couldn't have these, and I there was a part of me that had these longings to have these types of conversations with the boys or the men in my life. But I was I was I was made fun of, or you know, not so much shame, but like a playful
mm,
shame and a
mm.
teasing, you
Right.
know, like, hey, who talks about feelings? Like, you know, we're here to
Mm.
pull out our dicks and shit, you know. And sorry, excuse my French. But yeah, I also want to show a level, yeah, a level of authenticity, because this is who I was, and I want to be able to share, like, as I'm saying all this, and here I'm here even trying to edit myself, like, this, what I'm saying here is like, is as raw as it can get. It's
Mm-hmm.
human, you know. And like,
Mm-hmm.
why are we trying to edit and it become or make ourselves palpable to the community? Like, this is human life. It's visceral, right? It's like, we get sad as fuck, you know. We this is about, this is really about being in touch with the aliveness of being in this world, right? And so, um, how can we be like that without judging another person and their wildness because of how they were brought up? Um, yeah, I don't want to be a half a person, you know. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
the fullness of what even might offend you, and I think there's
Mm-hmm.
beauty in that. And
Mm-hmm.
it is not my responsibility to soften my edges in a way. I mean, I could be mindful, right, and also be playful in a way that you know, I'm not gonna be like irresponsibly rash, but it's truly from my heart. Um, anyway, um, what I was saying is back to my observation about how I was unable to have these experiences with the men in my life.
Mm.
I started to feel alone again, you know. um, and I started noticing when I was having these experiences with women that I was hurting their feelings, and because I was in touch with my feelings, um, I knew I knew what it was like to be hurt by the women in my life that I had relationships with, you know. And I I noticed that as much as I was there for my brothers, for the boys and the men in my post college life, um, we 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 didn't have the vocabulary to talk
Mm-hmm.
about the specifics, or even why we were feeling a certain way. You know, we didn't have a we didn't have a playbook for these things. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
just not something that's taught in school, or maybe not even taught by our peers, let alone in the fucking religious world. Like, they don't teach emotions. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God. And it's just so human. I mean, yeah, yeah, we'll learn the ways of Jesus, but which is beautiful actually. But uh, in this in this in this in this in this world that we live in, I think it's supplemental to have emotional literacy, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as a way to navigate our feeling body and how we might want to relate to another. Because if when I look at myself as a man, and the ways I hurt the people in my life and the relationships that I was in, I'm noticing that because I wasn't. I didn't have an emotional literacy or the way I connected to my feeling body because I didn't have a vocabulary for that and the way I related to those emotions and the feelings in my body, then what what how does that inform me how I perceive another human being that
Mm,
I can
mm-hmm,
have that mirrored back to me because I did and here goes the whole thing about having an emotional bankruptcy, that we will continue to hurt people because we don't even know that we are hurting ourselves,
mm,
having the
mm-hmm,
language that we are hurting ourselves. Um, and um, yeah, I started thinking a lot about these things, and I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. And I was continuing to be in loving, intimate relationships with partners, and over and over again, I wasn't aware of how I was not making my partner feel safe.
mm,
Um, and that's another layer about this patriarchal conditioning and the stance of and the privilege of a male body that, and when I say privilege, um, um, because if we assume that the male body is not threatened by something of a greater privilege, then we don't we don't perceive threat as what women do. And um I I acted on that a lot unconsciously. I would have I would have arguments with my partner. We would live in a safe neighborhood, and she would give me shit because I didn't want to lock the door, and not understanding the subtlety and the layer
mm,
of like women don't feel safe, you
mm-hmm,
know?
mm-hmm,
Um, and I didn't understand that. I want to go back to the feeling of loneliness and how this all adds up.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, I was on a journey to navigate, like, why was I continuing to feel so alone even though I had so many friends, I had so many intimate friendships and relationships with other people. And it's because I was questioning these things, and my whole body of friends were not, you know. Um, and this is when this is a part of when my spiritual journey was happening. I started this Facebook page in 2009, which was also the beginning of my spiritual awakening. Um, and yeah, I started this Facebook page, and it was called Positivity Vibrations. And I wasn't a reader then. I didn't read books. Um, but when I started that page, which was which started off as a quote page for positive quotes. And little did I know that to maintain and sustain the popularity of this page, which amassed over 100,000 followers in the course of
wow,
over 10 years. But I also didn't know how to monetize it at the time.
mm-hmm,
Um, that journey of 10 years, because I couldn't find quotes, forced me to read different things.
mm,
Oh my goodness. And my whole world opened up. So I started reading authors. I started listening to lectures of different philosophers and different thinkers and thought leaders. And I got into philosophy. I got into spiritual science. I got into mysticism. I got into um, esoteric wisdom. I got into philosophies in different parts of the world, from Indian philosophy, from from Russian philosophy, from Filipino philosophy, and just all these different ways of seeing the world enabled me to see people in a whole new light as well as myself, and I got into understanding different religions of the world. And I anyway, this was my like body of research that fed that positivity vibrations, and it was a purely an accident, and uh it got me into meditation, practicing meditation. It was teaching me how to be in prayer. um and as I was learning meditation, I was learning more about, after meditating, I literally meditated every single day for at least 60 minutes for 3 months, and I had the most profound experiences and these releases in my body that I didn't even
Mm,
have a understanding of what was occurring, and synchronicities, and after meaningful coincidences were happening, people were coming into my life. I was having the most like profound dreams, and lucid ones at that, and people were starting to give me messages through dreams, and I'm like, the
mm,
hell what kind of world do I live in? And I started, granted, because I was having these experiences, I started to even feel more alone, right? And but the people that I was connected to are the ones that were resonating with the quotes that I was putting up on positivity vibrations, and they would say things like, I've been following you for 5 years, and you know what? You changed my life. I wouldn't be here
mm,
if it weren't for the words or the passages that you shared. And then because some of my friends knew um what I was posting on this page, the specific friends started coming out to me individually because perhaps they were resonating or asking these same questions and curiosities that I had, and that gave me an opportunity like, hey, these are my people. These are the people that I
mm,
can grow with
mm,
because, and then I started to feel less alone about those things. Uh, Funnily enough, Um, even having that experience, I still didn't even have the language for being a man in this patriarchal world,
mm, mm,
which also came as a shocker, um, and a tremendous amount of grief about because of not knowing, especially as a man who is really devoted to like really wanting to do good work in this world, and being totally blind to this lens that could have even deepened my lens about the world. Anyway, um and then 2020 happened, COVID, and everyone was racing towards online because everyone's at home.
mm, mm,
And I met some really cool homies that were saying that, hey, have you done men's work before? Um, and funnily enough, my wife at the time was also telling me like, have you explored men's groups? Right? And yeah, I checked one out in Oakland for the first time. In 2019, this was before 2020. I'm sorry. I'm having my dates mixed here. But yeah, I went to my first men's group in 2019. Um, and it was in Oakland, California, and it was run by this man by Sarvang Parik, and uh, he was a licensed therapist, and he was running men's groups for indigenous uh, indigenous people and men of color, um, and um, and I had the most beautiful, most like heartwarming experiences in this men's group, and I was hungry for it. I was looking for these
Mm,
intimate male male identified relationships, right?
mm,
Um and then COVID happened, and I started going to a bunch of men's groups online. Um uh and I was like, "Oh my God, there's so many men like this."
mm,
Oh my God. And I was so happy, and I'm like, but they were just all sprinkled like all around different parts of the world and in the United States, and I was like hungry for like, I know we were in COVID, but it was really teaching me that there are a lot of like beautiful, mindful, like embodied, emotionally aware men. And I was hungry to surround myself with these types of peers and to develop these kinds of relationships. And some of them became my coaches, to kind
mm,
of deepen my practice
mhm,
in my masculine essence, and even just continuously being around these type of men, then you rub off of them, you begin to model and like copy what is like healthy masculinity.
mm,
And so you do it enough, and you start to practice it yourself, and you start to use it on your day to day, and then at some point you become it, you know? And what I was finding as I was joining these men's groups, I found out that I was natural, and it felt really natural to lead them, you know? And um and as a man, like it felt good to lead other men, um, to who are also beginning to explore their emotional bodies. And um, as a man who feels like who knows how to feel, like it is the most beautiful thing to get a man to to express their vulnerability for the first time, and because men don't know how to do that, they escape their vulnerability, about the things that um, they were trained to escape through drinking, through sleeping with other people, or just numbing ourselves through entertainment or activities, or even being a busy worker bee in this kind of me being in California and the Bay Area. All everyone does here is work,
mhm, mhm,
because it's hard to make a living out here, and it's all about the grind and the hustle. Um, and it's a beautiful thing, but it also will fucking kill you if you don't know
mm,
how to balance
mhm,
the work life and the personal life, and the need to want to, like, you know maintain a kind of equilibrium in who we are. And this life in this Bay Area life is fucking hard,
mm,
anyway. um yeah, so I met some beautiful men, and I started to lead them right away, after 1 year of being in men's groups. Like, I knew this is what I wanted to do,
mm,
you know and so I started creating 8-week offerings, 8 men at a time, and I've done several of them, and created like these beautiful containers to offer to men to begin how to um, get in touch with their emotional bodies, to start naming these emotions, and to bring in the felt sense of like, where are these emotions happening
mm,
in
mhm,
our bodies, right? And
mhm,
because we are creating this bridge of communication of the way we relate to our emotional bodies, then we have access to a different kind of intelligence that informs our cognition, our
Mm.
decision making,
Mm-hmm.
you know? It becomes a compass that has been shut off most of our whole lives, you know? And it is my purpose in these groups to to introduce that to them, right? And ways to deepen that with other men and to witness other men in group who are moving through that and unpacking their past, unpacking their behavioral patterns, unpacking their guilt, you know, unpacking their shame
Mm.
in a safe container, because in a patriarchal culture, it is not safe to talk about this out
Mm.
in the outside world. It is, in fact, it is like taboo. You can't even talk about this shit at work. You'll be frowned
Mm-hmm.
upon. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what the hell? And so, like, imagine going to work every day and coming home. Um, anyway. I know we have access to therapy and all of that, but even that, that's an isolation. You're not in group,
Mm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
If you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, it is a start. I'm not bagging on therapy. Um, but men's, I would say men's circles and men's groups, the ones that are designed in the way that help men tap into the wholeness of their experience, I
Mm-hmm.
think is a very, very critical um, um, need
Mm.
for men's hearts and for
Mm-hmm.
men's for men to be able to talk about these things for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time, can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to see that there's so many men's groups. You know, not the incel ones, not the alpha male type ones. Anyway, but the ones that are exercising ways to tap into the feminine energetic aspects of our bodies. Because
Mm-hmm.
and then when we talk about polarity, right, then we're talking about how all humans have the polarities of the masculine and the
Mm-hmm.
feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And as men, especially in this culture, patriarchal culture, we fully exercise the masculine while shutting out the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not even gendered at all, but the manifestations of shutting out the feminine in as men manifest in ways where men are trying to satisfy that missing energy by taking advantage of women,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
taking advantage of Mother Earth, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and how that's of a feminine energetic quality. And so the reflections of how men or humans in general who are not tapped into those essences will seek out ways to satisfy that externally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
but it's a very ugly outcome
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I want to kind of piggyback off of your journey and kind of give a little brief overview of my journey and connect it with yours.
Yeah.
And then we can go more in depth with all the themes and yeah, pull out the gems from our journeys.
Absolutely. If you can help kind of like lead and guide me, because sometimes because of my neurodivergent ADHD tendencies, because I know I also come from a history of childhood trauma. And so
Mm-hmm.
the way I go about things, sometimes I can go on a real crazy tangent. So
Mm-hmm.
feel free to interrupt me, to keep me in line, because I will. And for me, being in my feminine body, I will go with the flow, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and see
Mm-hmm.
which direction. Um, but uh, but yeah, for sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think we've talked in the past about both being Enneagram four wing fives, and I think that
Mm,
we can see so many connections between things. It's hard
hmm.
to be linear because we see how it all connects. So
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have different guests, and there are various levels of linear or nonlinear, and I enjoy the variety and
Yeah.
just whatever it takes us. But yeah, I'm gonna jump in a little bit. I'm gonna try to keep it brief because I've talked about my journey before.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. I wrote down some notes to kind of relate to some of what you said. In my own journey, just like you, I grew up, in a Christian household, and people have various experiences of how you strict or whatever upbringing, religious or non, and mine was probably like not super harsh, too dogmatic, but just because of my parents and being the firstborn, and them learning, and then also my experience with some peers, I think that kind of hit me hard when I was young, with the shame and suppression, and like I think a lot of men are, I say that the two emotions they're really allowed to show is like anger and horniness. For me was like, don't show anger. That was really suppressed. And so that's how I think, unlike a lot of men, I grew up more in my feminine. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, there was a lot of like shame. I was bullied a lot. But unlike you, I started reading from a young age, and that was where I really, I think, began to connect with my emotions and other people who were experiencing similar things to me, and finding that empathy through reading and books, and also a somewhat emotional intelligence, through the words I was reading. It took me many years to be able to express with my own voice that, but I had it in my head, at least from through reading. Um, but I was homeschooled, and I had a lot of loneliness there. And I was like, I want to go to school, and maybe that'll solve the loneliness. And then in junior high or fourth grade is when I began to go to this Christian private school, just like you went to Catholic. And I found more loneliness there, more bullying, more not connection with men or boys at the time, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went to high school, and I went to a public high school, and like you, I was like, oh,
Huh.
what's going on here? I think, you know, everyone's experience is different, but maybe because I was in the Bible Belt, and or just my own thing, I still was kind of I didn't venture out doing anything too crazy. But since junior high, there was like um, a porn addiction, and there was a lot of shame in that, and so there was the inward struggle, and a lot of shame,
Mm.
along with being bullied just for being different than other people, and not I was never one to try to change who I was and fit in and stuff like that, but it was still very hard with the bullying, and just feeling different, and feeling like there's something wrong with me.
Mm. Mm.
And then college was the first time, you talk about counseling. Like, I agree with you. Like, I think that men's group is super powerful, but counseling was a start for me to, and I had a male counselor, and he taught me meditation, and it was great. But
Mm.
to realize, like, hey, I'm not so messed up. I'm not so bad. There's so much voices from the past, from other people and parents, you know, Christianity, whatever, that were telling me I'm so terrible or wrong or different or whatever. And so that was the start of like giving myself grace, and believing myself and stuff like that. And more softness, more of
Mm.
that feminine energy coming in a healthy way. And then also like, some masculine, like I can do this. I can get through college. And eventually I did.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, I had a few girlfriends in college and grad school, and because I wasn't emotionally healthy at the time either, I kind of had this savior complex. I don't know if you relate, and let me save them and their issues and focus on their
Oh
things,
yeah.
and
Yep.
all that perfectionism, and you know. it's like they're also wounded and they're looking for like a savior in a way, but then obviously that's unhealthy, and you can't meet their expectations and they can't meet your expectations, and everyone's left dissatisfied. They're resentful of you like taking over
Hmm.
their power. You're not looking at your own issues. And yeah, there was, obviously breakups both times there.
Yeah.
And that's college and grad school is kind of when I started experimenting more with like sexual things and trying to find satisfaction. And I think, men are very so often disconnected from their body, like you said. And so instead of knowing how to relate to our bodies and our emotions and somatic, we're looking for the answer externally in sexual relations, trying to get that feminine from females
Hmm.
and that softness. But then we're just like you said, using them and as objects, and that's dissatisfying for everybody.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had more shame because I knew that wasn't really the answer either.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I went to this Christian camp, and it was a good and bad experience, but it was interesting to see like they had a very idea like men are supposed to lead and the women follow, and it was interesting to see. And but then so many of the men I saw as the leaders, there was so much like posturing, like not true
Mm.
authenticity, but just acting like they knew what was right and what was going
Oh.
on,
Mm.
and then the women not feeling like they could speak up. And like you growing up, I always connected to women a lot more, and I think it's because I know I was more connected emotionally than the men. I wanted that deep relationship and the connection, and I could do that with women, but because men were so disconnected from that, it was never deep relationships, and I didn't have as many male friendships in that way.
Hmm.
And yeah, so then yeah, I went to grad school, and I was really struggling mentally, emotionally, being away from my family the first time. Still had so much loneliness, so much imposter syndrome. People were really smart now, and yeah, I was trying to get over anxiety and procrastination fueling me to actually get through grad school. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was just kind of following some advice from my mom just because I liked, reading and writing, maybe a big English professor, but I didn't really know if I wanted to do that. So I still hadn't really come into myself and who I am and what I was really passionate about, what
Mm.
I really wanted out of life. And you just kind of following other people. Obviously my mom was she just gave me the best advice she knew, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I was just following because I wasn't connected with myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's when I had my like Kundalini awakening. I was trying to get close to God and all that stuff, and was meditating, and but then I got uh, too disconnected from from physical reality, and
Right.
got put in
Right.
the psych ward, and then that just reinforced all that shame, all that you can't survive as an adult, something's wrong with you, all those things from childhood just reinforced even more. And then there's the disconnect like from that high and from that connection to God, and that's lost. And where did that go? What's wrong with me? What did I do?
Hmm.
And just confusion about like I couldn't believe what I believed before. I had an emotional deconstruction from Christianity. But yeah, so for a long time I went through the dark night of the soul, and I was on meds, and I was really even more disconnected from my body and my
Oof.
emotions. I tried to go to counseling. I couldn't even make any progress because I was so disconnected.
Oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
eventually I got off meds, and I kind of got an idea of direction in life, and I went to grad school again for psychology. Um, but shortly during that time, I started my spiritual journey. I read a near death experience book. I connected with my own experience. Um, and I feel like that's where I started really growing a lot, exploring so many different things, connecting with so many people, throughout my life. Like, unlike you, I don't know if I there was times where I had groups and even like men's groups, and there was some connection, but I still always felt like different. I still felt like I wasn't part of the group fully, and I didn't relate. But in my spiritual journey, I started meeting a lot of people who I could relate to, and it was just so healing and so good, and men as well, and
Hmm.
really mature and emotionally connected men, and so um, that was very helpful for me. Um, and you know, but still, I think that I still would love to like find a men's group or more men in person to connect with. But I think that the spiritual journey, at the very least, has helped me fully. Well, not fully, but feel get into my voice now, and that's part of why I started this podcast and
Hmm.
um, be authentic and be myself and not be afraid of what other people think and explore emotions and somatic and then explore like the patriarchy and how the goods and the bad of all of that and
Hmm.
just our Western way of thinking and living life and how that affects religion and culture in all the ways. So
Right.
yeah, I relate to your journey in so many ways, and I'm sure many men can understand or see parts of themselves in this journey. So thanks for sharing and being so
Wow.
authentic and vulnerable about your journey.
Wow. Kendall, there's so many parallels between you
Right.
and I. There's so many intersections, you know. I mean, it's a little different story, but I think they all point to a lot of similar challenges that men are moving through, right? And so I'm glad you're able to share your story and how it relates to mine. And I hope it relates to other men who listen to what both you and I and the work that we do individually, and what we share with the collective, right? And the journey continues, you know. We're here to deepen our work, and we're here to deepen other men's hearts or other and other people, you know, just humans in general. We're just trying to be a little bit better so we can make it to tomorrow at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I sent you a bunch of notes, and maybe where we can go from here is just kind of like cover some of those notes and just talk about those points.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so when you're talking about patriarchy, maybe first just tell me like what that just like if you can summarize
Ooh,
shortly, what does that mean?
yeah. It can mean so many things, but let me sit on this real quick.
Sure, sure.
And I really want to give an easy um, definition in the way that it lands, because patriarchy, as I've moved through my own study of it internally and the way I relate to others, um, and also understanding how it how it came about and how it's associated with the male body or men in general. What I'm noticing is uh, patriarchy is almost like a diagnosis. It's a condition, you know,
Mm,
that is
mm-hmm,
that at least today, as I'm observing, it doesn't it's not applied to one gender, you know, it's
mm-hmm,
everyone. It's like an energetic signature of like domination and
mm,
disconnection,
mm-hmm,
and finding ways to not relate, you know. I think, to put it simply, like patriarchy is patriarchy is not knowing how to relate to ourselves and to one another,
mm,
um and just and uh and without that, then how do we build relationships, you know?
Right.
ultimately. And there's this whole like conversation or plea for the matriarchy will replace the
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy, and
Mm-hmm.
even that has a semantic undertone of dominating the
Mm.
other, as
Right.
if the matriarchy without the patriarchy, and if we're talking about the essence of polarity, and we need both
Mm.
to
Mm-hmm.
coalesce in a
Mm-hmm.
way that's generative, that's cooperative, that's
Mm.
in relation with one another, then in the end, even though it may appear to be the solution, carries with it the same dominating kind of energetic signature of the patriarchy. And I think we really have to confront that, you know? Um, and this is no bash to the women, who desire for uh, such a need, especially because they are at the, the receivers of harm and violence and murder, um, from an unconscious patriarchal, disconnected, um, uh, part of our humanity. And so I get it. I get it. Um, but deep down, inside, fundamentally, there is something to be met here, and to be observed, and to be acknowledged, um, um, that in order to relate to one another, I'm coming across this now, is that I think we are fundamentally disconnected with um, our essential fundamental part about who we are,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and um, and there's so many ways to look at the story about Adam and Eve, and I think, and the ways other religions or cultures around the world would talk about these complementary forces of the yin and the yang,
Mm.
or light and shadow, and we're talking about divine union. Like, what does that look like? In Adam and Eve, in Christianity slash Catholicism, like there's something to be understood there about how do we come to yeah, how do we find a way to understand these complementary forces about
Mm.
ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and understand the dynamics that this is who we are, and if we are rejecting the men in our lives, if we are denying the women in our lives, we are essentially saying we are denying this half part of ourselves,
Mm.
right? And I think as human beings, that is something we are having to reckon with that truth, with that reality, because until we can meet that truth, then I don't believe we can sustain ourselves if we deny that truth,
Mm-hmm.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Two things that came to mind. A lot of Christianity, and this is the case in my church I grew up with, that they don't believe that women should be leaders in church, or be like preaching, or depending on the church, like serving. They're always in the background, and
Mm,
the men are the voices basically. And it's like the women can talk to their husbands in private, but then and it's not like completely like there's life groups, and then women will talk in that as well. but
right.
but there's such a I was like, they have their own experience, they have their own wisdom, they have their own unique perspective, and they have something to share. And because of our beliefs about them not leading and speaking up, we're missing half of
Yeah.
ourselves, and
Yeah.
it's such a disconnection. And
Right.
then
Right.
another thing I thought about was actually that idea. In college, I was big into Lord of the Rings, and that was my senior research project. And so I'm
Yeah.
reading about Aragorn, and someone was writing about how he embodied the masculine and the feminine so well, and that's what made him so beloved and such a great hero and the complete man. And I was like, wow, I've never thought about that. And that was,
Yeah.
that's stuck with me ever since. And obviously, that's a big theme in spirituality. We have both the masculine and feminine side of us, and if they're not balanced, then it creates dysfunction. So it's not about masculinity or femininity separate, but it's something within everyone, whether you're male or female. And the goal is to become whole, to embody both the positive of each, and without each other, they're disconnected and they're unhealthy. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And to take it to another, to add to the embodiment about the masculine and feminine polarities and the essences within us, um, some men are more feminine,
Mm-hmm.
some women are more masculine, and those are their natural tendencies, whether it's within their own kind of upbringing, or if it's their natural,
Mm-hmm.
way of being,
Mm-hmm.
if we assume that our spirits came into this human body to express itself. There is a dominating essence in each of us. Sometimes it's more balanced, other times it's, I wouldn't say balanced, but it's just different, right? And to identify
Mm-hmm.
who we are fundamentally, and to honor and acknowledge which essence might be more about who we are, then we don't have to shame one another about, especially from a gendered lens, like you're too masculine or you're too feminine. They're just who they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to embody and understand the dynamics of the feminine and masculine within us,
Mm-hmm.
and how that changes in our day to day and situations, right? Then it's an
Mm-hmm.
oscillating energy, and we show up in the way that is appropriate to the other person, who might be experiencing a different part of that polarity, right? and then
Mm-hmm.
and then if we understand what is the magnetism or what is being pulled away from each other, it's a matter of understanding which of the essences are we embodying at this moment, and then to adapt in that moment, so there is an attraction that continues, right? And
Mm-hmm.
a magnetism. And right now, because people don't understand how to embody the dynamics of that, then what we're up against is situational and environmental, without having to understand the embodiment of how those energies live within us at each moment in each day, and how do we show up in a way that is in essence to relate to one another, because we understand those essences within ourselves in such an attuned way. Then we can all get along. I'm not saying this is so basic. Like, I wouldn't say that we get along right away, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
practice, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
practice to
Mm-hmm.
know those fundamental differences and how it moves through us differently at each moment, so we can show up at we can communicate what's going on with each other and with our people. And I think yeah, and that's all tied in with, like, the dynamics of emotional embodiment as well, and like what that
Mm-hmm.
is. Like, there's so many layers to understand about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how to show up with each other in a relational way. And yeah, these are important aspects. And going back to patriarchy, like that, if patriarchal is fully masculine essence with the denial of the feminine, then yeah, back to it again. It's a disconnected way
Yeah.
of being, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's great. And going back to patriarchy, in my notes, I wrote, yeah, exactly, loss of self connection.
Yeah.
And then there's it's an individualized culture, and we're becoming more separate from each other, and then competitive. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
because and well, I don't know, it's like the chicken or the egg. It leads to lack of relationship, leads to lack of communication, leads to lack of understanding how to work through conflicts. And it's so easy to just run from that, in one respect. And it's so easy also, it's kind of this paradox, because it's also like we're so easily accessible through our phones and through our technology. um, but then we can also just like run from each other. It's so easy to be like do our own thing and go our own way, and we
Yeah.
don't learn to be mature and work through things, or um, you know, have accountability, have groups. You know, and women are better in the sense of like they are more likely to find community and have groups and talk. And guys are less likely to do that. And you know, I think that again, we've talked about like sexualized relief in women,
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
and using as objects. And yeah, I think too that that leads to when men do find community, it leads to this tribalism, this rigidity, because of their anxiety about loneliness. When they do find community, they're more rigid about keeping things the way they are and keeping their identity with as the group. And so if people have outside ideas or are different, they're more likely to be like, you're wrong or you're bad, or throw them out. And so I see a lot of rigidity within men and communities.
Very true. Very true. I'm glad you brought that up, Kendall. And this is you know, I bring this up a lot in my my men's work too, about the reality of that, because when men come into men's workspaces, where it's a container to be safe about the what we're experiencing as men, right? Um, this is this is different than the external patriarchal world that is operating outside of this container of mindful men, right? Um, and to finally have talk about what they're noticing for the first time within this little bubble of truth that we're in our little group, our men's group, right? The and how how that differentiates from the external world. And so there's a grief that has to
Mm,
be met there, and it's
hmm
so tremendously, it's so fucking big to say yes to the truth of that. And
hmm
I experience a lot of men you know, pulling out because it's they literally have to kill that part of their ego, that
mm,
false
hmm
that false identity that
hmm
has that they survive, you know, they use that to belong to a false world, and
hmm
to say to something more authentic, to say yes to something that is who we fundamentally are in the way we are intended to relate to one another, is is a very tall ask, you know.
hmm
And
hmm
men, and there are some men that meet that truth, and they they'll cry so fucking hard. They may grieve for weeks until they release that lie. That's like
hmm
killing a part of who they are to make room for the truth of who they really are.
mm,
Yeah.
hmm
And
yeah,
yeah, and I went through
yeah.
that in my own personal journey. Um, and I'm not. It's not easy. That's why we need to be in men's groups, and that's why we need to hold each other, and we need to be there for each other. We need to say what you're experiencing is real, and I'm here for you for that. You
hmm
know?
mm, hmm
And
yeah.
I see you, you know, I see you. You are not alone in this. And we need to support our each other in those ways. A lot of the journey is going to be alone, but to know that someone sees you in shedding that is a relational unit for us to get us there, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. It brought to mind. I've talked to therapists and ones that do like marriage counseling. It's hard for the men. I mean, it's hard for men in general to come counseling, but it's more taboo to talk about emotions and hard things for men. Um, that's feminine or weak or whatever.
Yeah.
But then to marriage counseling, because women so often have more of the emotional intelligence and language, and the men are like behind, and so they're
Mm,
feeling weak or defenseless or whatever.
right.
And so like men's group is a way of safety, and we're all here together and we're supporting each other, and it's okay to talk about hard things or emotions or stuff like that. um, and that helps with men not projecting onto others, because they haven't dealt with their own emotions.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about violence earlier. um, I've read that like school shootings are 95% men, and so much of it is like men that are feel very lonely and isolated. And I just, everything we're talking about, I can see how that contributes. And like their suicide men's suicide rates are like way
Yeah.
higher than women's as well.
Yep.
um
Yep. And no, no, these are all very alarming real statistics, and it's a reflection of a disconnected man, you know, and not being in circle in group to be able to 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 um to share this commonality. I mean, the first step is really to fucking talk about it, you know. There's a whole journey ahead of that, but to name it is a very, very hard thing to do. And I think that's what makes men's work really beautiful, because it gives them the opportunity to take that first step and to build that muscle until they're confident enough to say like, hey, um I I know myself a little bit more, and I can be there for my partner emotionally, you know. I can, because I can mirror those emotions that I wasn't able to mirror to myself at
mm,
all in the
mm-hmm,
beginning, you know.
mm-hmm,
And you probably understand this, like we're all mirrors to each other, you know. And
mm,
if
mm-hmm,
if as men, and we're not looking at ourselves in a way that's honest, then how can we see another person if we can't even see ourselves?
mm,
It sounds so simple, but it's so fucking hard, you know?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
everything almost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And part of not being connected to the feminine, then we're not connected to the body, like we talked about, and then with our intuition, which
Yeah.
is then our connection to God and
Yeah.
spirit. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
then that makes it, there's a loss of the divine identity, and then men become uh, identified with more shallower things
Oh
like
yeah.
sports or politics or even like religion, but they don't
Religion.
understand that
Yes.
they're not, that it's not actually a connection to themselves and God in a personal experiential way.
Mm,
And then that leads to rationalization, and then the rigidity and the dogmatism
mm,
that we talked about.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, yeah, the spiritual narcissism that
Mm-hmm,
occurs, even though a person may experience have a spiritual experience, right? If they're disconnected with themselves, they're gonna carry on this spiritual knowing in a disconnected way, and that's all
mm-hmm,
kinds of fucked up, you know. It's like,
mm-hmm.
oh my
Yeah,
gosh, can you imagine? Like, there's so many layers to that, and it just
yeah,
blows my mind how that's so pervasive.
right.
Especially how much spirituality has become a trend even, right?
Mm-hmm,
And people,
mm-hmm,
I don't, I've observed that there are unhealed people
mm-hmm,
sharing their quote unquote spirituality um, without the awareness that they still continue to be disconnected to themselves. Like this spiritual awakening sometimes may even blind themselves to the human conditioning that we still have to
Hmm.
meet, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that yeah, there's a book that I love the title. It's called The Sin of Certainty, and I
Mm,
think that when we are disconnected from ourselves and our experiences, then we again that rationalization, and then we think that we've got life figured out, and it's A to B to C, and we've got our theology all
mm.
laid out in a row, and then yeah, there's just uh, we think we have it figured out, and then when other people have differing views, we're not open to it, and
Yeah.
we're not open to growth, and there's that perfectionism, and yeah.
Yeah, there's a lack of humility and
Hmm.
curiosity.
Right.
There's again, it's yeah, humility and like a curiosity. Like there are those are windows to finding ways to relate. Here we're talking about
Hmm.
how do we relate to one another where there might be a
Hmm.
perception where there is none. And I'm a stickler for that. You know, I'm always trying to find ways to relate, even if it may seems so freaking ridiculous, you know. I just have so much hunger to like how can I connect with you even if it
Hmm.
may seem
Yeah.
strange, you know?
Right.
And I think we need to create those neurons because then it yeah,
Mm.
it literally creates those neurons to find ways to
Hmm.
connect, right?
Hmm.
And that's again, that's a practice. Oh man, there's just so much to say about that.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I think obviously all this patriarchy leads to a devaluing of women themselves, and obviously, like I'm all for women having jobs and careers and going
Yeah.
for that, but then women get coerced into this patriarchy and think that their value is in being like a toxic masculinity and
Right.
success and competitiveness and individualism and getting ahead. And like I said, I'm all for them having careers, but also, I think it's just as valuable and beautiful and meaningful in being, if you're uh, uh living at home, having kids,
Yeah.
or you can have a career and have kids, but just those things, or if you don't have a career and are supported and you do other things, or a man doing that, either way,
Yeah.
those things are just as valuable as a career. And uh, yeah.
No, 100%. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I yeah when yeah we can see women be successful in this, for lack of a better term, capitalistic world to kind of chase
Hmm.
and create their empire. But then there also needs to be the lens of like understanding their fundamental essence is also grounded in their feminine as well. And so without that knowledge, then we have how do I say this? Like, unless we know how to embody or become aware of those polarities
Hmm.
going in one direction in the world, whether it's fully in our masculine or fully in our feminine, could be misdirected because
Yeah.
we don't know, we don't have a groundedness about how those energies operate, and so we are
Hmm.
led by our environment, by the culture that
Hmm.
that 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 influence us or um uh, fools us into like this is how we become fulfilled. Again, it's a more of an external thing, right?
Hmm.
But
And
yeah,
let me
yeah, yeah,
flip it too.
for
Let
sure.
me say, as for men,
Uh-huh.
then they don't understand that their family, their wife, their kids
Yes, yes,
is equally important and value to cultivate that relationship and the
yes.
romance and love and leading their kids and being there for them. They're not just a provider. So it goes
Yeah,
both ways.
it goes both ways. It goes both ways. And the most beautiful relationships. what I'm saying as a man, and for a traditional male and female relationship, who also understand their masculine and feminine essences in a way that where they can communicate, have the most flourishing. They can be the caretakers, the providers, but then they get to name like whose responsibility is can that be within this relationship? Because if they can communicate that in a grounded way, knowing their own groundedness and their own understanding of their polarity, then it can be a really beautiful thing to have a family in in
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. The last notes I have that I've not covered yet are I can see how the patriarchy has affected the culture at large in the sense of like focus on technology and innovation, um, and
Mm,
just money and more and more and more and more. And but
yeah.
we're losing the feminine, the arts, and the meaning, like why are we doing this, and is it even the right path, or how do we do this in a responsible way, which relates to the earth and ecology and how we're treating the earth, and just stripping of its resources, and kind of that violence and that sexual dysfunction onto
Mm,
the earth itself, like it's just something to be used for our own benefit, and instead of like protected and nurtured and respected.
oof, oof. Yeah, there's a lot there. Did you say the word did you say the word money too?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, money is masculine, right? Um, uh, and when I say that is like I'm listening to my own body because this is
Mm,
something I struggle with as well. Um, because there's and I want to name a truth here about my own development into my own deepening my own dark masculine, if you will. And when I say that, someone who knows how to lead in a firm, kind of like assertive but loving way, right? Um, and uh, and that and I'll just be honest here that is a journey that I'm developing to deepen because
mm,
that is something that is important to me. Someone who's really deep in their understanding their feminine essence, because even in my natal chart and my Chinese astrology reading, I've had practitioners tell me like you have a lot of feminine in you, like you were born into this
mhm,
world
mhm,
like being like that in that
mhm,
feminine essence. And
mhm,
so also a part of my journey is to also cultivate and deepen, um because I have this natural essence of this feminine depth and capacity, and the next iteration in my journey is to deepen my masculine essence so I can take this depth from this feminine energy and share it from this masculine essence in a really
mhm,
grounded, beautiful,
mhm.
loving
Right.
way. And I'm so
Mhm,
excited. Like I'm already have been incrementally embodying that in many different ways. And I'm definitely on my way and I'm very excited. Um but back to like technology, and how that penetrates into this world as well. Um, and there's a huge responsibility to that, right? And with a disconnected masculinity, and technology penetrating or permeating this world into the natural world that we live in, which is the feminine world, right?
mhm, mhm,
Can, as you already see in you already see environmental destruction. You see
mhm,
all these ways that we are disrespecting nature,
Mm-hmm.
because of our technological masculine advances, um, and again, it's another reflection externally of what our disconnect is within our human understanding of ourselves. And so, um, it is my purpose to lead folks to find that balance and to embody those essences in a calibrating way, grounded, embodied way, so
Mm-hmm.
we can begin to reflect these beautiful tools of technology and have a be symbiotic and be able to relate to the natural world, to these ecosystems in a way. And I'm sure ancient civilizations, and if I'm sure you've gotten into, like, they knew, and even
Mm-hmm.
indigenous people, like, in their own kind of like waves of technology, they knew how to relate to the natural
Right.
world,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a resurgence of that in little pockets of the world, but not at the scale that we would like to
Mm-hmm.
see it, right? And
Right.
but it is possible, and I'm really excited if that happens in the next few generations,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that there's many ways the feminist is starting to rise, and that's one respect I'm seeing. Like, I still in the psychology world and seeing
Mm,
how the Eastern modalities and somatic and so many things are in meditation. All these things are starting um, to blow up in psychology and the importance of them and holistic thinking and holistic health and
right.
there's so many different ways. So yeah, it's great to see the start. Of course, we want it to be more, we want it to be faster, but we have to be patient with the way it is. And like you were saying, I was born into this world with a lot of feminine, and my journey's also been
Yeah.
um, how do I get into my healthy masculine? How do I take these concepts and ideas and everything like that? How do I put them into practice in a grounded way? Um, yeah, so it's all great.
It's all
It's a
great. It's
journey.
all great. It is a
Yeah.
journey. I'm all for it.
uh,
It's so exciting. It's
mm-hmm.
like I eat this shit up. Like, I love it, and I can't wait to
Mm-hmm.
learn more. I'm
Yeah.
hungry to, like, just go even deeper, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just the nature of who I am. And the deeper
Mm-hmm.
I go, I get excited about sharing what I've learned with others.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's our
Mm-hmm.
purpose, you and I,
Mm-hmm.
because we're willing to go deep, and we're willing to
Mm-hmm.
make the mistakes. We're willing to feel it all,
Mm-hmm.
so we can lead others to feel it too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The last I forgot. I have one more note. In the paradox of loneliness is that we actually are not aware of how to be alone in a healthy way, and so that's what that like unhealthy
Yeah.
masculine is. We balance the feminine. We come into our body and ourselves, and we're connected with creativity. We connect with God, with spirit,
Hmm.
and we're able to love and have grace for ourselves
Mm.
and enjoy our aloneness, not in an unhealthy way of, oh, I need to run away from other people, I need to hide, but in a way of like, I need healthy time alone to reflect, to create, to think, to rest, to whatever, to commune with God, with nature, whatever. And then that just helps us be healthy and recharged. So then when we come back into community, we can outflow the energy that we've recuperated in a healthy way for other people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the paradox of loneliness, and it's an art knowing how to be alone with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful thing, and it's also painfully excruciating, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no one understands me, because I only understand myself anyway. Or
Yeah.
the journey is very much alone. We were born alone, and we will die alone. People will be by our side when we are born or when we are on our deathbed, but we leave alone from our own bodies, and we come into this world in the
Mm-hmm.
same way, and I think that that's just a testament, a clue as to like, oh, I think it's also important to learn how to be with ourselves, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and like even my own personal journey, with with my childhood um abuse. Um, I, I can be more specific, childhood sexual abuse and the shame with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And having to be alone with that for a very long
Mm-hmm.
time in my life, right? And um, you are forced to live with that aloneness, and there's as painful as it is, uh, there are some really unique lessons and teachings that only you can discover.
Mm-hmm.
But what it holds is such a beautiful nugget, that um, that eventually, that you can share with others who are deep in this version of aloneness. You know, I know many women have experienced sexual abuse as well, you know, being victims of the patriarchy, you know, and they're survivors. But what even a deeper shame is, a boy or a man holding that secret within a patriarchal culture, and the
Mm-hmm.
shame
Mm-hmm.
is perhaps even more tremendous, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not to shade the experience of a woman, but a man.
Mm-hmm.
Having to share that, I think, is a really great gift, and um, uh, a kind of aloneness to share, um, to dissolve the aloneness of many men who are experiencing this version of loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
and it's deep. You know, I would like to share that this is another part of my journey, as you know, I've only actively worked on this part of my trauma for the last 5 years, and there was a lot of unpacking, and it wasn't easy, and and my body is like tingling
Mm-hmm.
and lightly shaking just talking about this, but
Mm-hmm.
I know in the next steps in my journey, this is something I want to talk about more, you know. um, and I think a lot of men need to hear it, who have gone through something similar, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I think it also, and and as difficult as that this process has been, I've also healed a lot. I've learned a lot about healing, that is unique to to other to other men who might be going through other types of healing, but sexual abuse is childhood sexual abuse is another um, intricate beast, if you will, to want that I really want to share and articulate, that part of my journey, to give an opportunity for men to say, "Me too," you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for sharing. I know, like, I don't know just how difficult that is, and
yeah,
vulnerable, and I'm sure brings up all the emotions, like you said.
for sure, for
And
sure.
I've met women that have talked about, and I've known women, women that are very close to me who've experienced it, and just the secondhand um, experience of that, or knowing about that for myself is hard. So I can imagine how hard it is to actually experience that. So, and then
Yeah,
like you said, that's even more uh, taboo for to men. And so, thank you so much for sharing. And I think that sharing these things, these traumatic things and things that are labeled as taboo, that helps other people who feel lonely in their experience and be like, oh, this person also experienced it, and they're being forthright with about it, and there's someone
hmm
I can connect to and relate. And I just know how much reading or talking to other people who've experienced traumatic things in whatever fashion, that's a huge part of what's been healing for me and helping me not feel a
Alone.
loneliness.
Yeah.
And as we um, find strength in being alone and dealing with those pains and traumas, that creates so much power and strength within ourselves, that when others share their pain, we have the strength to not feel assaulted or this is too much for me to handle,
Hmm.
and we can hold space for them to share and to be empathetic and be quiet and just be presence and safe and loving, which then again breaks the loneliness for them. So yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely. Fully receiving your words. I appreciate the acknowledgement, and I know it's a delicate topic, but it's a necessary one. And I look forward to sharing that part of myself in the far future. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing conversation. We covered so much. Really enjoyed it. I really appreciate all the wisdom you shared, your authenticity, your vulnerability. um, yeah, it's been great.
Ah, it was a pleasure to be asked by you to be part of sharing within your community and your followers, and you're doing beautiful work, and thank you for the opportunity to share a part of my story, and um, and I hope people hear it, and I hope it gives them
Mhm.
a little bit more hope and a little bit more courage to step out of that loneliness. And I hope some of the things that you and I have shared become mirrors to themselves and say, like, hey, if they can talk about it, I could probably talk about it too. And that is a huge gift, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and I want to give that out as much as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.